There are places in Mexico where time stands still, where the hands of the clock rusted a century ago. They stopped, frozen by the weight of tradition, by the power of money, by the complicit silence of generations. Today we are not going to a poor neighborhood. We are not going to a clandestine grave dug by drug traffickers. Today we are going to a place of dazzling beauty, a place that smells of lavender and fertile soil, the La Inmaculada Hacienda, in the heart of Aguascalientes, a paradise with high walls, an Eden guarded by fear. Behind its wrought iron gates, a family kept a secret, a sacred tradition, a pact sealed with the pain of their own children. For 5 generations, no one dared to speak. No one dared to break the chains, until a girl decided she would rather die than obey. This is the story of a cry muffled by luxury, of a golden cage, and of a system that, when confronted with horror, decided to look the other way. It decided that paperwork was more important than a soul. If you believe that the truth should be priceless, if you believe that justice must be sought even in the most elegant salons, stay with me, subscribe, and listen, because silence also kills. Musical pause. The music becomes a little more tense, a low, constant hum. It all started with a man who wasn't looking for trouble, Ricardo Valadez, a young journalist, one of those who still believe in the power of words. Sent from Mexico City to Aguascalientes. The task was simple, boring, a report on the rebirth of the wine industry in the region. Photos of vineyards, interviews with winemakers, tasting notes. Nothing that could change the world or destroy a life. Ricardo spent his afternoons in the downtown bars, listening, observing, looking for local color for his article. It was there that he heard the name for the first time. La Inmaculada. They whispered it, with a mixture of envy and fear. The De la Garzas are not of this world, an old bartender told him as he polished a glass until it was almost worn away. They have their own laws, their own God. Ricardo smiled. A colorful phrase, good for his article. He didn't know that phrase was a literal description. That night, when he returned to his modest hotel, he found something under his door, a piece of paper, folded 8 times, as if each fold contained a layer of fear. The handwriting was shaky, urgent, 4 words, only 4. The cage is made of gold. There was no signature, no explanation, just that sentence. And the smell of cheap perfume and panic. Ricardo felt a chill. He could have ignored it. He could have thrown the paper in the trash and gone on with his life, with his article on wine. But he was a journalist, and curiosity is an incurable disease. The next day, he began to ask questions, discreetly. He mentioned the name De la Garza casually. The reactions were always the same. Averted gazes, conversations interrupted, a wall of silence, solid, impenetrable. The people of Aguascalientes knew there were doors that should not be touched, and La Inmaculada's was one of them. The family's power was legendary. It was said that they installed and removed governors, that their lawyers were wolves with leather briefcases, that their fortune was as vast as their cruelty. But it was all rumors, whispers, nothing concrete. Ricardo spent 2 days banging his head against that wall. He felt frustrated, stupid, chasing a ghost. He was about to give up, to go back to his vineyards and his bland interviews. Then he got a call from a blocked number, a woman's voice, old, tired, broken. "You're the journalist who asks questions," she said. It wasn't a question. "It's me," Ricardo replied, his heart beating fast. "There are things that must die in the dark," the woman whispered. "But that girl's soul doesn't deserve it." The voice broke. "If you want to know, come to the Encino Chapel. At midnight. Come alone." The call was cut off. Ricardo tasted the metallic flavor of fear in his mouth. It could be a trap. It could be a joke. Or it could be the key to open the golden cage. At midnight, under a pale, sickly moon, Ricardo walked toward the chapel. The air was cold. The streets were deserted. Every shadow seemed threatening. He reached the church door, and he waited. The silence was absolute. He thought it had all been madness. Then a figure emerged from the shadows. An elderly woman, hunched over, covered in a black shawl. It was Sofia. She had been a servant at La Inmaculada for 40 years. She had escaped a decade ago. But her mind had never left the walls of the Hacienda. Her eyes were two wells of ancient horror. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What is happening in that house?" asked Ricardo. Sofia trembled. She looked around, as if the ghosts of the family could hear her even there. "It's not a house," she whispered. "It's a tomb." Musical pause. The buzzing intensifies, becoming dissonant. They sat down on a stone bench, far from any streetlights. The night enveloped them. Sofia began to speak, and with every word, Ricardo's world crumbled. "It's not out of malice," she began, a phrase that froze the journalist's blood. "It's out of love, a twisted love, a love that suffocates." She described the bonding ceremony, the sacred tradition of the De la Garza family, the one that no one, in 5 generations, had dared to break. "When the heir or heiress turns 16, explained Sofia, they must be purified. They must die to the world in order to be born into the family." Ricardo frowned. "Purified?" Sofia nodded slowly. "They lock them up, in the room downstairs." "What room?" "The one with no windows, no light. The one lined with cork and silence." Ricardo felt a knot in his stomach. "For how long?" 7 days, 7 nights. 7 days, in total darkness, in absolute silence. 1 meal a day, passed through a slit at the base of the door. No human contact. Not a word. Only the sound of your own breathing, of your own heart racing with panic, of your own mind breaking. "It's not just silence," Sofia continued, her voice trembling. "Through the walls, they talk to you. They talk to you. There are speakers, hidden, and the voice of the matriarch, now Doña Isabel, recites the litany to you. The litany. Stories of the outside world, a corrupt, dirty, dangerous world. A place where love does not exist, where there is only betrayal. And at the same time, it tells her about the purity of the family, the sanctity of her lineage, the estate as the only refuge, the only safe place. 7 days of psychological torture, of brainwashing, of self-demolition. Ricardo ran a hand over his face. He felt cold sweat. "Why?" he managed to ask. "So that they never want to leave," Sofia replied. "So that they understand that outside those walls, there is only hell. So that the bond with the land, with the family, is stronger than anything else." Sofia hugged herself. The memories were freezing her from the inside. "I heard the screams," she whispered. "Whose screams?" "Doña Isabel's, when it was her turn, 50 years ago. I was a little girl, newly arrived to help in the kitchen. The screams lasted 3 days. Then, silence. When she came out, she was a different person. Her eyes were empty, full of duty. Ricardo felt the cold, rough texture of the stone bench beneath his hands. The air smelled of damp and a fear so ancient it seemed a part of the earth itself. He could imagine it. The darkness, the echo of a relentless voice, the loneliness that devours you from within. It wasn't physical mutilation. It was mutilation of the soul. "And now?" asked Ricardo, his voice hoarse. Sophia looked up. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Now it's Elena's turn." "Who's Elena?" "Doña Isabel's granddaughter. She'll be 16 in 2 weeks. A pause, an abyss of silence. "She's different," Sophia continued. "She has light in her eyes, the same light her mother had." Her mother? Doña Isabel's daughter. Her name was Laura. She couldn't bear the bond. A year after the ceremony, she took her own life. She threw herself from the highest balcony of the Hacienda. The horror was an endless spiral. Each layer revealed a deeper one, darker. "Elena knows what awaits her," said Sophia. "Last week she tried to escape. She ran through the fields. But they caught her. Now they have her locked in her room, watched, waiting for the day." Ricardo felt a wave of nausea, the image of a teenager, trapped, waiting for her turn to have her spirit broken, to be sacrificed on the altar of insane tradition. "That's why I looked for her," said Sophia, taking Ricardo's hand. Her skin was cold and thin as paper. "You have to do something. You have to save her." Musical pause. The piano notes are now faster, urgent, full of anxiety. How does something like this begin? At what point does love become a prison? Ricardo spent the next night awake, investigating, connecting the dots Sophia had given him. The De la Garza story wasn't in the society columns. It was in the court records, in property deeds, in the footnotes of old newspapers. 5 generations back. Don Alejandro de la Garza, the founder, a self-made man, obsessed with his legacy. His first son, the original heir, was sent to study in Europe. And he never returned. He fell in love. He married. He renounced his surname and his inheritance. For Don Alejandro, it was a betrayal worse than death. He saw the outside world as a nest of snakes, a poison that corrupted the pure blood of his family. He became obsessed. A feverish paranoia took hold of him. He had to protect his lineage at any cost. Inspired by twisted religious texts and monastic discipline manuals, he designed the bonding ceremony. He didn't see it as cruelty. He saw it as a vaccine, a necessary pain to prevent a greater evil, an act of supreme love. He wrote it in his diary, a leather-bound book that became the family Bible. "I am tearing the world away from them so that the world does not tear them away from me," he wrote. "They will suffer for 7 days to be saved for all eternity. Their will must be broken so that the will of the family can flourish." His second son was the first to go through the ceremony. He came out obedient, docile, bound forever to the Immaculate. And the tradition was born. Each generation replicated it, not out of sadism, but out of a terrifying sense of duty. They believed they were saving their children. Cruelty had been disguised as love. Torture had been disguised as protection. Doña Isabel was not a monster. She was a priestess, the guardian of an insane pact. And she was willing to sacrifice her own granddaughter just as she herself had been sacrificed, to keep it alive. because the fear of breaking the tradition was greater, much greater, than the love for the girl. Musical pause. An abrupt silence, then a steady, mechanical rhythm, like that of a machine. With the whole story, with Sophia's testimony recorded on his phone, Ricardo felt he had a weapon. A bomb. He just needed someone to detonate it. He was wrong. He didn't know that the system doesn't seek to detonate bombs. It seeks to defuse them. His first stop was the municipal police headquarters. A concrete building, hot. It smelled of stale coffee and resignation. He asked to speak to the officer on duty, a burly man with a thick mustache and a tired look. Ricardo explained the case, urgently, passionately. He talked about the ceremony, the confinement, Elena. He played Sophia's recording on the desk. The commander listened without changing his expression. When Ricardo finished, there was a long silence. The only sound was the squeaking of a ceiling fan. The commander sighed, a deep sigh of annoyance. "Young man," he said, with exasperating calm. "We're talking about the De la Garzas." "I know. That's why it's so serious. That's why we can't do anything." Ricardo felt a pang of disbelief. "What do you mean you can't do anything? It's kidnapping, torture, child abuse." The commander leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "Look, kid, there's no formal complaint. Your witness is a former employee who left 10 years ago. The victim is at home with her family. It's private property. She's a child about to be tortured." The commander looked at him, and for the first time, Ricardo saw something in his eyes. It wasn't evil. It was something worse. It was cynical pragmatism. "They're their traditions," said the commander, as if that explained everything. "Strange, yes. But it's their business. We don't get involved. And I advise you not to get involved either." He pointed to the door. The interview was over. Ricardo left the police station. The afternoon sun seemed brutal. He felt a cold rage in his veins. The commander's polished desk, the hum of the fan, the absolute, impenetrable indifference. The system wasn't broken. It was designed that way, to protect the powerful. He didn't give up. His next stop, the State Human Rights Commission. Maybe they would understand. He got an appointment with a lawyer, Ms. Robles. An elegant woman with a soft voice. She received him in an immaculate, air-conditioned office. She offered him water. She listened attentively. She took notes. She nodded. She asked the right questions. For a moment, Ricardo felt a spark of hope. When he finished his story, the lawyer clasped her hands on her desk. "Mr. Valadez, what you are telling me is deeply disturbing," she said, with a tone of rehearsed empathy. "So, are you going to do something about it?" Ricardo asked. She smiled, a sad, professional smile. "Our powers are limited. Without a direct complaint from the victim or a first-degree relative, we cannot initiate a formal investigation on private property. But the victim is being held incommunicado, and her family is the one hurting her. I understand. It's a very frustrating legal vicious circle. We can, if you wish, send a letter. A letter requesting the family to allow us to verify the minor's well-being. A letter? Do you think they'll respond? Sure. Come see the girl we're about to psychologically torture. Ms. Robles looked down. It's protocol, Mr. Valadez. My hands are tied. Hands tied. That phrase, it echoed in his head, a euphemism for cowardice. for bureaucratic complicity. He left that office feeling even emptier. The air conditioning had cooled his skin, but inside he burned with impotence. The system was not a shield for the weak. It was a maze designed to get you lost. Last resort, the most direct, the public ministry, the prosecutor's office. This was not about protocols or powers. This was about crimes. The place was chaos, people waiting in hallways, the smell of old paper and desperation. After 2 hours, a court clerk attended to him through a thick glass window. Ricardo, once again, told his story. The clerk listened without looking at him. His eyes were fixed on a pile of files. When Ricardo finished, the man yawned. A long, loud, blatant yawn. Then, without looking up, he spoke in a monotone voice. "Let's see. The alleged victim, is she a minor?" "She's 15. She turned 16 in 10 days. "Okay. And she's at her grandmother's house, correct?" "Yes, but..." "Then it doesn't qualify as unlawful deprivation of liberty, because she's in the custody of her legal guardian." "But they're going to lock her in a basement?" The clerk finally looked up at him. His eyes were dull, dead. "Look, sir, that's future speculation. We can't act on what might happen. The law punishes actions, not intentions." He looked for a form in a drawer. "What you can do is fill out this form. It's 7C. Notification of possible risk situation. Attach a copy of your ID, your witness's ID if you have it, and a statement of the facts. We'll stamp it. And a preliminary investigation file will be opened." "And what happens to that file?" "It is assigned to an investigator. He will determine whether there are grounds to proceed." "And how long does that take?" The man shrugged. "Weeks, months. There are many cases." It was the final blow. The system wasn't looking for justice. It was looking to organize horror into files. Classify it, file it away, put a stamp and a file number on suffering. Ricardo stared at the form. The paper felt cheap, fragile, a useless tool against such an ancient evil. He felt the walls closing in on him, the murmur of the people, the squeak of a door, the sound of justice giving up. Desperate, Ricardo did what he knew best. He wrote. He spent the entire night writing the article. He poured all his anger, all his helplessness, all his horror into the words. He sent it to his editor in Mexico City. "Publish this, now," he wrote in the email. The response came the next morning. A phone call. His editor sounded scared. "Ricardo, I can't publish this." "What? Why?" "It's the truth. I got a call from a lawyer, from a very, very important law firm, on behalf of the De La Garza family. They mentioned a defamation lawsuit that would ruin us, and other things." "What other things?" They weren't explicit. They just said that Aguascalientes is small, and that sometimes curious journalists have accidents. The line went silent. "I'm sorry, Ricardo," said the editor. "The story dies here." The phone felt heavy in his hand, lifeless. Not only had the government system failed him, his own profession, his refuge, it had also turned its back on him. Fear was more powerful than the truth. Money was more eloquent than justice. Final music, slow, desolate, the same piano notes as at the beginning, but now they sound like defeat. Ricardo stayed in Aguascalientes. He couldn't leave. He was like a ghost, orbiting the Hacienda, waiting, not knowing what for. Elena's 16th birthday arrived. It was a sunny day. Beautiful. The sky was a cruelly perfect blue. Ricardo sat in his rented car on a dirt road overlooking the walls of La Inmaculada. He saw nothing. He heard nothing. Only silence. A thick silence. Heavy. The silence of a scream that no one would hear. He imagined Elena, alone, in the darkness. And he felt a part of him break forever. A week later, he saw movement. The large iron gate opened. A black, luxurious car slowly pulled out. Ricardo strained his eyes. In the back seat, through the tinted glass, he saw a silhouette. A young woman, pale, with perfectly styled hair and eyes that looked without seeing. Empty. It was Elena. The ceremony was over. The bond had been completed. They had killed the girl. And they had left the shell behind. The car drove away down the road, kicking up a cloud of dust. And Ricardo stood there, alone, surrounded by the vast, indifferent landscape of Aguascalientes. He had failed. The system had worked perfectly. He had protected his own. He had maintained order, the order of the grave. Evil does not always scream in dark alleys. Sometimes it whispers in air-conditioned offices. Sometimes it signs with gold pens. Sometimes it disguises itself as tradition, as love, as duty. And the worst accomplice is the one who, in the face of horror, shrugs his shoulders and says, "It's protocol. My hands are tied." Elena's soul was not destroyed in a dark basement. It was destroyed at the desks of tired officials, in the calls from expensive lawyers, in the cowardice of a system that prefers the peace of cemeteries to the uncomfortable battle for a single life. And that is the reality that no one wants to see. The forbidden reality. And I will not forget Elena's name. Neither should you.